Dan is our Director of SEO Innovation here at Catalyst, and if you're looking for more of Dan, you can find him in numerous places. He has co-authored one of our ebooks called Mastering the Art of Social SEO. He's a featured author at Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, Search Marketing Standard. Also a featured speaker. He's been at each of the SES U.S. Seminars this year and spoke at. He also speaks at NYU. And hosts a New York City SEO meetup. Lastly, you can see he's led SEO strategy for a number of our large clients, and today still continues to work on some of our largest clients. Incidentally, if you are a client and are interested in having a private session with Dan on either Patent Watch or one of his many training sessions, you can let your account manager know, and we'll be sure to set up a time with Dan. So Dan, welcome.
Thanks very much, Rich. Appreciate the intro.
You're welcome. So it looks like the pattern of black and white Panda Penguin has been changed to some colors. Yeah. What's behind that?
A little bit. You know, when you look at the recent updates with Panda and Penguin, they choose those animals because they represent white hat and black hat SEO, whereas this major update was not so much an algorithm update to prevent spam or penalize black hat SEO. It was more of an architecture infrastructure update. So I think I wouldn't be surprised to see zebra or whatever rolling out in the future.
There you go. Okay. They're going to run out eventually, aren't they? I don't know how many black and white animals there are. Hey, Dan, I would like to mention format change here. We're kind of updating something here where we're splitting Patent Watch almost into two, where we're going to have this WebEx session that we will record. You will walk through our slides, but then we're going to basically kind of walk right into an SEO pub chat that you're also hosting. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, SEO Pub Chat is a Twitter chat where a number of SEOs and anyone interested in following SEO topics will just join at 3 p.m. Eastern Time every Wednesday. We have it every week, and we talk about various SEO topics. So this week, we're going to use the SEO Pub Chat as a forum to handle the question and answers that come out of this presentation. So if you have a question and you didn't get a chance to submit it via this presentation, just head over to the SEO Pub Chat, ask your question there. We'll give some instructions at the end on how to actually participate, and then you could also view myself answering questions as well as other SEOs, really smart folks jumping in with their own thoughts.
Great. All right, Dan, take it away.
All right, so in choosing the patent, I typically look for any patents that Google or Bing or Facebook or Amazon or any of the big players present that might affect our industry in some way. Of course, Hummingbird is a major update that Google released a few months ago. Started reading about that, came across a couple of really interesting patents, and I think this patent that we're going to look at today probably best encapsulates what the purpose was behind Hummingbird. And as we jump into it, we'll explain a little bit on how that's going to affect our daily lives. What's interesting about this patent is that it really reflects a huge trend shift in terms of folks getting on their phones more than their desktop, accessing the internet via their tablets and their phones, and searching differently on their tablets and phones versus desktop. And because of that trend, and I believe we're looking at over 50% of the U.S. primarily accessing the internet by probably January of next year, is the research I've looked at. So this is Google's response. They need to be able to understand the complex types of searches being done, not just with voice, but also with images on your phone and with audio. And you can think of Shazam, and as you're listening to music and you're trying to identify what the music is or what the sound is. So there's different input types on a phone than there are on a desktop, and because of that, Google has to react. So they filed a number of patents. This one particular is going to focus on how does Google understand the meaning behind the keywords that are used in a search query and the meaning behind an audio clip or an image. And it uses that to produce more relevant results. So while Hummingbird wasn't an algorithmic change in and of itself, it actually is a framework for many future algorithm changes. So this is going to really help us understand what to expect over the next couple years when Google is rolling out all these algorithms. This patent is particularly interesting for a few different ways. One, it's interesting to organic search because it's going to help us understand why rankings are moving and changing. And it's going to help us understand the different weights that Google is putting on-page copy and the relationships between one page and another page and relationships between links. And it's also going to change relationships between social and web pages. So it impacts quite a few things in the organic search, but it also impacts the paid search algorithms as well. So when Google's trying to figure out what ad should I show in this particular search or what ad should I show in this particular website, that algorithm to figure that out is actually coming from this patent. So if you do paid as well as organic, pay attention, think of how you can apply these principles. From a daily perspective, I think this is really interesting because we need to shift our mindset a little bit on how we approach keyword research, because it's fundamentally different after this patent is incorporated as opposed to what we've traditionally been doing for the past 12 years. Looking at this patent, it's a Google patent, of course, filed in 2011. There's at least one future version of this patent that's a little bit earlier. So the way patent works is they'll typically file a patent, they'll get the approval, and then if they need to make edits or additions or amendments, they'll file a second patent. So it's not strange to see 5 or 6 patents with the same name. They're just updated versions of this. Google did that a lot with their social search and the Google Plus patents. So we move on. The background of this patent is quite interesting, and I want to read this word for word. It's a little tough to understand, but it's perfect the way it's explained. It's 2 knowledge items are sometimes associated with each other through manual or automated techniques. Now, that sentence in itself is a little challenging because we're not used to using the phrase knowledge item. So what is a knowledge item? Well, it explains knowledge items could be anything physical or non-physical represented through symbols. And what that really means is characters, basically, or an image. For example, they could be a keyword. They could be a node, a category, people, a concept, products, phrases, documents like web pages are other units of knowledge. Now, you guys remember when Google rolled out null? Null was their answer to Wikipedia. They wanted their own version of Wikipedia. And a null, as Google described it, was a unit of knowledge. So they wanted to have an encyclopedia on everything, not just physical products, but it could be concepts and popular phrases. Anything that was a unit of knowledge that you could know about, they wanted to categorize in this Wikipedia-like website called null. That was shortly shut down because it just wasn't working out with their strategic direction. But you can think of a knowledge item as just about anything. And what this patent, the background of this patent is, they're explaining when there's 2 knowledge items, there could be an association between those 2 knowledge items. And it could be done manually. A person can manually create an association, or it could be done automatically. So let's look at a quick example of that. Let's say one knowledge item is, let's say, a car. And I think I used this example later on. One knowledge item is a car, and another knowledge item is gasoline. So there's an association between a car and gasoline. Now, if I'm Google, I might hire people to manually enter in these knowledge items, enter in a car, and enter in gasoline, and I'm going to manually have them connect my knowledge item saved to car to gasoline, or it could be done automatically. I could be scanning a web page, and it's talking about cars, it's also talking about gasoline, it's also talking about wheels and mechanic and AAA, and I could automatically associate those different knowledge items with each other. So that's the background of this whole patent or invention. Let's look at this visually, and this is probably one of the most useful diagrams I've seen in a patent, where they take a set of words and they start with ski, highlighted in orange, and then they map out the relationship between the word ski and the number of other related words. And if you look at the legend on the right, it says that if there's a thick arrow, that means there's a strong relationship. So for example, the word ski is strongly related to athletic equipment, and the word ski is also strongly related to skiing. Now if you look below it, there's a thinner arrow, and thus a medium relationship between ski and bindings and ski and K2 set. And I'll get a pointer here so you can see what I'm doing here. ski, and these various different words. And as you go out and look at the different degrees further away, there could be a thick relationship or strong relationship between K2 ski and K2. That makes a lot of sense. But as you move further out away from the root word, which is ski, you'll see these numbers next to them increase. So ski starts at 0. It's a weak relationship between ski and K2 ski. And then as you get further out, the relationship is even more distant, meaning this is an 8, and even more distant with athletic equipment company, which is a 12. So what that means is that the relationship is farther apart, they're less relevant to each other. This becomes a very important concept, so keep this image in your mind because we'll be referencing this quite a bit. Now, take a look at this search query result of ski, and you'll notice that in the paid, you're looking at skis, which is equipment. You're also looking at a % off skiing gear, and then as you get to the organic, you're looking at ski resorts, and then on the right side are more resorts and gear, etc. So it makes a lot of sense if we go back a phrase and we see the relationship between ski and skiing equipment as well as skiing the action. So that's why ski resorts often come up. So because of that strong relationship of these related words, that's why these websites are automatically showing up already without Hummingbird really having a strong impact. This is just pure linguistics. Now let's take a look at the old world of how websites were typically considered relevant for a query like ski. So I found this website. It's what is this? Snow_skis in the URL. If you look at this paragraph, it's just jam-packed with the word ski and different variations: ski boots, ski bags, whatever. Here's K2. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to increase the frequency and the density of the word ski on this page. Because in the old world, relevancy was based on the text matches from the word you're searching for to the word on the page. So clearly, the word ski appears quite often on this page. It's an exact match or a close match. So that must mean this is a very relevant. Now, this is okay, but it ends up coming up with a few problems with search results because sometimes people search for words that have multiple meanings. So for example, if I just look for apple, this word apple might refer to Apple computer as well as apple the fruit. So if I'm a search engine, what do? Do I just choose Apple computer and give all the results relative to Apple computer, or do I just go with apple fruit, or do I do a combination and mix the results together? So Google has to figure out which results you really want. And there's a few different ways it does that. It could look at your previous history. It could look at your Google Plus profile, your interests. It could look at your friends to see what their interests are and ascertain that you have similar interests. So there's a number of different things. It could also look at, are you doing your search on your phone? Are you by an Apple store? All these different things. But this patent in particular, the goal of it is for Google to try to understand the meaning or intention of a particular word based on other information it has about that knowledge unit. So for example, in this query, Apple computer, the word computer is helping Google understand what my intention is for the word apple. Same thing with the word fruit, right? So in a query, if there's 5 or 6 words, Google wants to see how closely related those keywords are to each other so that it can understand whether you're looking for apple the fruit or apple the computer. Now that was a very simplistic example, and we'll get a little bit more complicated. But the idea is that Google needs to try to understand, if you have a word like apple, what the various similar words are related to that, so it can understand whether this is a knowledge unit of a fruit you're looking for, a knowledge unit of a computer company. So the way it does that, as per this patent, is first it starts by receiving some input. So it gets the knowledge unit. It could get it from crawling a website. It can get it from a database of information, manually entering it, whatever. It gets the information, the knowledge item, and then it processes that knowledge item, meaning that it starts to analyze it, looks at all the relevant information it has to try to understand what it is. Then it associates or tries to associate that knowledge unit with other similar knowledge units. So just like you can see, almost visualize a social graph, now it's got this word graph, similar to what we looked at before, where it's associating other knowledge units and mapping the distance and their relation to each other. Then it's going to try to determine the related meaning of that particular knowledge unit to know that this item right here is a fruit, whereas the other Apple logo, even though it's actually a representation of a physical apple, it means an Apple the company, a computer company. So it tries to determine the related meaning, and then it determines the meaning of the knowledge item, of course, and then from that it associates that meaning of the knowledge item with other knowledge items. And we see an example of this here. We have, of course, the picture of the fruit apple, and we've got a description, but then we have nutrition facts, calories, fat, cholesterol, all the way down here. So these are themselves a knowledge unit, right? Calories has its own definition, has its own related information, but it's also a part of Apple. It's related to each other, and it's a property of Apple, meaning that this apple as a fruit has several different properties. One of those is calories, one of those is fat, one of those is the color red, one of those is the weight, one of those is the texture and where it's grown, and the name of the type, the variation. So there's a lot of properties that each object or knowledge unit has, and Google has to associate all of those properties to each other. So this is the process it uses. And a lot of that depends on the type of information. So maybe it gets on a web page, first time it's ever heard of this concept of the apple as a fruit, and it reads about all this information, the sodium, the nutrition, so it saves that and it associates that with the fruit apple. Now, we know that calories is a property of the fruit apple and not a property of the company Apple. So when someone searches for how many calories are in an apple, this calorie word is helping to inform the intent of this search by associating. Google's mapped out how closely related this association is. So since it's such a close match, Google knows with certainty that you're talking about the fruit. So this way it gives you an actual calculator it's got from the USDA that it's built, a little widget, instead of just a list of results, because they're very confident. There's a very high confidence level in this particular query. Now, here's something interesting. If I did a search for how many nutrition in an apple, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but let's be honest, most queries people type out or search for, especially on their phone, don't make a whole lot of sense. So this query, how many nutrition in an apple, Google actually understands that there's a relationship between the word nutrition and there's a relationship to calories. So it'll actually rewrite this query to read why so many calories in an apple, or how many calories are in an apple. So Google's smart enough because of this mapping to actually do some query rewriting on the fly. So when we think of keyword research, we also have to consider that Google may automatically rewrite some queries if it feels like it can provide a better response with that. So how is this actually going to change what we do on a day-to-day, the keyword research? First of all, it's less about the actual words on the page. It's more about the concepts and how closely they are related to the query. So again, using this example of an apple as a fruit, you've got all these related concepts and all these related knowledge graphs. Now, if I want to rank for apple nutrition, I don't necessarily need the words apple nutrition to be on the page, right? What I'm really trying to rank for is the properties of an apple that's related to nutrition. Does that make sense? So it's not about the actual exact match keyword that has to be on the phrase. It's really about understanding the related properties and the related keywords that you can talk about that are closely associated with apples. Here's an example of this. And I know we're getting close to our time, so I'll try to wrap up so we can hit SEO Pub quickly. Let's say I want to rank for the keyword luxury cars. Now I could write a page about luxury cars, and that'll probably rank really well today. But in the future, Google's going to move away from the exact match into understanding what are the entities and knowledge units that's related to luxury cars. So in this case, Jay Leno is a knowledge unit. He's a person that's well known for collecting luxury cars. So if I want to rank really well for luxury cars, I'm going to create content that actually talks about Jay Leno. Why? Because Jay Leno is closely related to luxury cars. So this sort of changes the way we think about content development and keyword research. Here's a quick example of Matt Cutts. You can watch this video. If you get the presentation, you can click a link to it. He's trying to explain to people how a query on a mobile phone via voice is different than a query on a desktop and what we have to do differently to optimize it. And basically, Matt Cutts' point here is don't think about keywords. Think about the intent behind the keywords. And the example he gave is if someone is doing a search on a mobile phone, and let's say it's 5 or 6 or 10 words, typically what they do is they put an "and" between the words. So if I wanted to search for how to change a flat tire on a 98 Mazda, what they would typically do is they would say look for a document that contains the word how and contains the word change and contains the word flat tire and contains the word Mazda. And as they're continuing to say, we only want documents that contain all these words, the scope of documents available shrinks very much to only a couple documents that contain all those words. But what Matt is saying that they need to change the mindset of how to think about search. And the user is actually giving you more information than if you just search for flat tires. So they actually should provide more results because they understand a little bit better about what you're trying to search for. So for example, you might search for how to change a tire for a flat car, but because Google knows that AAA is closely associated to what you really want to do, which is get your tire changed, they might give you results for AAA, even though the AAA website has nothing to do with changing the flat tire of a Mazda. So this is a very interesting stance that they're taking about switching the mindset, and this is really why Hummingbird is rolled out and what we can expect. So as we wrap up, I don't want to make this too late for the Q&A section on the SEO Pub, but essentially Google's helping better understand the intent of our searches so we don't have to focus so much on on-page SEO. We need to think about not so much keywords, but knowledge units and how certain knowledge units are relevant to other knowledge units. And we also need to think about how our phrase relevancy or the concept of relevancy is changing so that, again, AAA is very relevant to changing a flat tire, even though it's not a variation of the keyword flat tire. Lastly, just a few quick recommendations. So Google bought this huge database called Freebase, right? And this was a giant collection of information and their associated properties. This they bought to convert into the knowledge graph. So this was their basis for the knowledge graph. And you could still go to Freebase, just do a search for it, get there and see the relationships between various words have each other and the information there. So when we're doing keyword research, we don't necessarily need a list of a keyword and all the variations and all the search queries, right? We should be thinking of how do certain topics and themes map to other certain topics of themes, and then look for ways to interlink that from each other. So when we're trying to build links, it's not about, oh, give me a link with a certain key phrase in it. It's give me a link from a relevant related topic. Think of the Jay Leno exercise with luxury cars. Influencers too. We know people are influential in certain topics. If we understand the word relationships between what we want to rank for and the people who are influential in related topics, those are the people we want interacting and sharing and plus oneing and voting and doing all this engagement type thing. That's going to pass the agent rank, which is what we talked about on a previous Patent Watch.